our thesis is built around the belief that identifying and backing these visionary founders and then helping them build world-class teams is that key to unlocking outsized returns.
What a Swell investment looks like is kind of this sweet spot, cross-section of both founder caliber and category creation potential. We dive really deep to understand the founders, their origin story, looking for their kind of unique insights, their level of drive, and we're looking for this like maniacal customer focus. So, on the founder side, on the market side, we want, ideas and products that fundamentally transform, how an industry operates.
Hey everyone, welcome to the LinkedIn Presents Redefining Work podcast. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt. And today we are going to be going deep in the venture space. I'm joined by the co-founders of Swell VC, Ralston and Jay Patil, and we are going to be talking about how they invest in firms, what their unfair advantages are in terms of how they support founders, what they look for in founders, and a lot more. So guys, I'd love to have you just open up with a quick introduction for the audience. What do you want them to know about you? And Jay, I'll start with you.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Jay Patil. I can kind of dive into how we came together. I'm originally from Mumbai, from India. Made my way to the States about 25 years ago to go to grad school, and kind of the rest is history. And Rusty and I, we met 15 years ago as some of the first employees at an AI recruiting startup in New York City. And our job was to help founders build world-class teams. The tech at the time, wasn't even called AI. That we were building was aimed at digging deep into a person's intangibles and recognizing startup DNA in people. We saw firsthand that a startup's trajectory is determined more by who's on the team than anything else. And this insight is what really gave birth to Swell's people-first investment philosophy. As outsiders, Rusty and I looked at each other with no ties to Wall Street or the Ivy League networks or big VC, and we had to prove it with our own money before taking a single dollar from anyone. We started a proof of concept, kind of a fund zero, if you will. It was angel-sized investments, and that was how we launched Swell, to formalize our thesis that you win with people. The first investment we actually ever made was a founder, R.A. Trostall. His startup Tap Out at the time, we invested in their seed round and then helped to make his very first sales hire. And soon after that, Rusty and I went on to recruit 40 people out of 150, 160 employees that they had at that company over a span of about 6 years. And they grew to, from zero to over 50 million in revenue. And we eventually acquired for $360 million in cash. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, appreciate that. Rusty, what would you like to add for yourself?
Yeah, so I originally from Ohio, was born in the Midwest, and went to Miami of Ohio for university, and then lived, kind of worked in the music business, lived out west, lived in Nashville out west, and then eventually made my way to New York City, where I met Jay, at a venture-backed startup. And so he mentioned the story where we started, and that's led to, investing, a fund one, and now a fund two. So still in New York, love it here. And, it's grown an incredible amount in the last decade.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I want to come back to something you said around the role in the company, the kind of AI recruiting tool that brought the two of you together, and what you learned in that in terms of like, what is the DNA of people that tend to be really successful startup hires? Because, some of those tangibles or intangibles may overlap with other disciplines. Some are probably unique, especially at an early stage, to start up. So what is that? Like, what are the traits do you recommend founders look for, try to identify, and perhaps on the other side of that as well, like, are there red flags where like if people, have these types of traits or these types of qualities, that tends to not work well with a seed or early stage startup?
Yeah, it's a great, there's the few questions in there. I mean, I can tell you a little bit about just kind of how our early experience at that startup really shaped our understanding of venture, right? Especially early stage venture. I mean, this was a AI talent assessment startup where we were looking to kind of identify those traits in people by just recording phone interviews and voice conversations with them, right? Rusty and I and our team at the time, we spent thousands of hours, countless hours speaking with founders, understanding their challenges, helping them build teams. And some of those teams that we actually helped them directly recruit top talent to, they became industry leaders. And that really crystallized our belief that people are the ultimate differentiator when it comes to startups. It is the single most important variable, in the trajectory of a company. And we saw firsthand how the right people could overcome these seemingly insurmountable challenges. Right? That's what a startup really is. And most successful companies we saw, right, were always led by exceptional kind of visionary founders who in turn were able to attract exceptional people to their vision and their mission. And that's been a North Star ever since.
Yeah, no, very true. I think with startups, the biggest red flag that we look for is, or that is obviously noticeable, is a lack of self-awareness and a big ego. It's a lot of me, that I did it, it was me, and not a lot of we. And I think, there's a lot of things. Others include an inability to, clearly articulate a vision. Right, that's incredibly important when you're telling a story and fundraising and attracting people. Another one is like a reluctance to bring on people smarter than themselves. Because if you're building a team, you always want to hire people that are better, that are smarter, that have even more intellectual horsepower. All these things, and I think the best founders have that clear-eyed view of their strengths and weaknesses, and they're obsessed with addressing those gaps with people who are smarter than them. And, when founders are very ego-driven or defensive, on the other end, when they're like that, they end up with B players who, ultimately stifle the company.
Yeah. I think the ability to set ego aside is so key, because especially at that stage and on that trajectory, if it's a successful company, you have a new job every 6 months. And so you can't really be kind of locked into a particular, scope or role. And I've seen that mistake too, where some companies may overhire because, they think, this person came from whatever FANG company and, they're going to do that here. They're probably not. It's a different environment. Those skills and that experience, aspects of it translate, but not necessarily all of it. So you gave a bit of an overview of kind of how you got together and founded Swell VC. Obviously, you're on Fund 2 right now. What is your investment thesis? What do you think about when you're assessing companies and assessing founders and founding teams? How do you kind of gauge what companies and what founders are right for Swell VC?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Swell, I guess if you were to sum it up, right, we are an early stage venture firm focused on investing in founders who have this insider's edge via really deep domain expertise in the problems that they're solving for, right? Are obsessed with solving those customer problems and also have a proven track record of commercializing new products, right? From nothing to something in success. Thus, when they do that, a combination of that, that's what gives rise to entirely new markets. We invest from a stage perspective at the pre-seed and seed stages of a company. Our emphasis is on B2B software and sectors like AI, space, defense, and healthcare. Those are kind of our primary focuses. Our edge really when it comes to founders is we help founders recruit that top 1% talent. That's what earns us a right to be on their cap tables. And from the LPs, i.e. the investors who invest in our funds, our thesis is built around the belief that identifying and backing these visionary founders and then helping them build world-class teams is that key to unlocking outsized returns. And some of the Fund 1 winners we've had, include Loft Orbital, Science, Crisp, and like Rusty is mentioning, those are all Fund 1, and now we're actively investing out of Fund 2.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Lars, you mentioned, what are the signals, what are the things we look for, when evaluating investments? And, I'll jump in here. I mean, we really look for, what a Swell investment looks like is kind of this sweet spot, cross section of both founder caliber and category creation potential. We dive really deep to understand a founder's, their origin story, looking for their kind of unique insights, their level of drive, and we're looking for this like maniacal customer focus. So, on the founder side, on the market side, we want ideas and products that fundamentally transform, how an industry operates. So it's not just like incremental things are getting better and better. It's, it really is transformative. And, this tends to be like problems, that they're tackling tend to be hidden in plain sight, call it like the edge of the inside. You see it from the inside. You don't really see it from the outside. But you have to be, in it. And it's on that edge where, you can really look at a market, also from an outside perspective to solve something. So we look at that, but I'll contrast that with, we don't look for signals from anyone else besides the founders.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to us, who the other investors are. We commit when we have conviction. And there's this like Jimmy Iovine quote. It was like, when you're a racehorse, the reason they put blinders on is because you don't look at the horse on the left or the right, or you're going to miss a step. And that's what we do. Or we don't really care what other investors think. It's really early. We trust our instincts. And when we don't wait till like so and so is in. When we're in, we're in, and we make decisions decisively. And we love to partner with founders for obviously it's a decade plus, but hopefully it's a lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I want to. There's a kind of one of your differentiators I want to take into a bit with both of you is creating unfair recruiting advantages. And obviously, for all companies, talent is everything. That's why you win or lose in many cases. Beyond the strategy. But especially at that early stage when every single hire is critical. Every single hire can make or break your culture, your project, your product, your trajectory. And so getting those hires right and getting the caliber of them high is not easy. So like, how do you tend to work with founders to help them? You mentioned that kind of 1% talent. What does that look like in practice? Like, how do you actually kind of go about, you've made an investment, they're scaling their team, they're coming to you for like a head of go-to-market or head of eng, whatever the role, might be. Where do you go from there in terms of like how you help them and create that unfair advantage?
Yeah, definitely. So the first part of the question, or the unfair advantage, I think it's helpful to have context. There is this principal agent problem in venture when it comes to recruiting, and because you have a signer and a servicer, you have a GP that signs the deal and the check, and then passes it over to a VC, recruiting platform. And the problem inherent in this is that the platform person, really with no fault of their own, amazing people who we know, like they don't have the carry that the GP has, and they don't have the incentives to move mountains for a founder when it comes to recruiting. The famous Munger quotes like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And so, the platform approach becomes really like more like a customer success account management function with hundreds of portfolio companies. And what we do is, we saw this principal agent problem firsthand at the startup. And we were at this AI recruiting tech startup. And, for us, we really created a solution at Swell. No other VC firm has two GPs who also personally recruit for portfolio companies like we do. So we're leveraging the network we've built over the past decade, the skills that we've honed as well to source amazing people for the most critical roles. And so, fundamentally, like what that looks like is like we get in the trenches with them. We're conducting interviews with candidates. We view recruiting not as an HR process, it's a sales process. So it's selling candidates, we jump in and help negotiate offers and ultimately help close candidates. And it's to have an investor, talking to a potential, VP of sales hire, is different than having, maybe an outside recruiter and an investor who's part of that whole process and helping close them. So we're just very hands-on, and having that like real skin in the game is a big differentiator. And what is an unfair advantage?
Yeah. How, I'm curious to kind of expand on that. Like, how do you manage the success of that? And I guess what I mean by that is like, so what you described is certainly if you're getting a call from a GP versus a call from a recruiter, it's a different call. It's weighted differently, I think, from the talent you're trying to bring in. Certainly because obviously you have much more skin in the game and a deeper understanding of the business and the trajectory. How do you manage when like you've now done that, you've done that successfully a couple times over across your portfolio, and then now you become like, hey, wait a minute, we don't need to go to search. We don't need to tap into platform teams from other firms on the cap table. We can go to Swell. Like they've got it. Like, do you find yourself getting to a point where like you're kind of you have to push back a bit and be like, that's not something we have the cycles to take on right now? I'm just like, I feel like the success of that approach.
Good question.
Yeah. Might get you to a point where like, okay, you've got too many requests coming in that you can't service effectively.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're not volume shooters, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not going to help a company hire, 20 account executives. We do think that there are 4 to 6 roles at a startup, within every company that are incredibly pivotal. And we jump in, with those. So I think for us, it's knowing, what are the pillars of the company and what are the biggest opportunities and the biggest problems that they present themselves, and how do you map people to those things? So because we're not volume shooters kind of there. We're not J.R. Schmidt out there at the Knicks in 2000, whatever the year is. We're really just focused on that, like key hires. So I think there's that. And then also is, some of the searches were hands-on, sourcing, helping closing the candidate. In other ways, we're being like a talent assessment layer. A founder's already talking to someone. They're bringing Jay and I in to really help assess that person. And another one is really kind of like how we look at, from a playbook perspective, how do we look at, finding that greatness in people and startup DNA in people. So there are different levels, to our involvement as well, which make it not, overwhelming and managing, that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And Jay, I'd love to get your perspective. One of the other things that I know Swell does is kind of develop like a sync playbook that you use to bring to your portfolio. Can you break that down for me? Like, how does that work? What does it look like? What are the kind of ideal outcomes from it?
Yeah, I mean, the playbook is kind of this ever-evolving thing, right? It's basically everything that Rusty and I have learned and put to test and seen work and not work over the last 15 years plus together. So we kind of share that with all our founders and our portfolio companies. But the way to kind of describe it is essentially it's this framework, right? It treats recruiting, and I think Rusty mentioned this earlier, is like treats recruiting as a sales process. It's not an HR function, right? It's not about like trying to fine tune job descriptions, right, on online boards, because the best people are never looking. We train founders to approach hiring and really recruiting top 1% talent with the same rigor and the intensity that they would bring normally to landing like a massive $1 million enterprise deal, right? Imagine like the amount of work and obsession that goes into landing a massive contract, right? That's what we're trying to bring on a daily basis to hiring and team building. It emphasizes the importance of storytelling. It's how do you like leveraging employees with real skin in the game. How to build a systematic kind of outbound approach to attract those passive candidates who aren't looking, right? Who are heads down doing incredible things and maybe other adjacent companies in other industries. So everything from like crafting compelling outreach to tactfully picking the top 2% in those interviews, knowing how to even recognize those top 2%. What are some of the questions to ask? What are some things to look for? You kind of ask, we're talking about some of those red flags, right? We've codified this entire process and put that in this playbook that we like to share with every founder. It's extremely hands-on. Those 2 GPs who personally recruit for a portfolio, has essentially unlocked this level of alignment that no talent platform in the world can match.
Yeah. Rusty, I want to come back to you on this next question because you both kind of mentioned how you met in your last company doing kind of AI recruiting assessments. But you mentioned in your intro, you kind of started more on the entertainment side at CAA. And I'm curious, like, how did that, it's obviously you're working with talent, you're assessing talent, it's very talent focused, but in a different way. What did you take from that experience with you kind of into your career? And even now as you're, evaluating founders, evaluating talent, like I'm curious, like, were there lessons that came from that CAA experience that you are, were kind of formative in terms of how you think about identifying, assessing, and engaging talent?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I think one takeaway is, that entire business is about being right and being early. And that's synonymous with venture.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, my boss at the time, signed John Mayer off of YouTube. Right. And it was, it really was this obsession with, scouting and finding, people that were incredibly talented and could, potentially break out from something that was small into a massive artist, right? And so it was really cultivating that sort of, finding something that you see this quality about it, that it can be transformative in a way, and then knowing your instincts, cultivating that judgment to act on that as soon as possible, right? So that's definitely something that's synonymous with what we do now. I think the other thing that I took away from CAA and my time in the music business in Nashville and LA was just the intensity, right? Like before that, after that, I worked in tech sales. I moved into that, but nothing matched the intensity of working at CAA. I mean, it was. I mean, there were two agents that had offices next to each other, like about to cut each other's throat to sign an artist, even though they work at the same company, right? So it's just a very, very intense environment where I don't think I'll ever, it's just a great place to work when you're, I think for me, right out of college, just because the intensity was so strong and everything else after that in tech sales was pale, in comparison.
Yeah. I want to get kind of both your perspectives. This next question will timestamp this recording a little bit, but so I'll just give you the firm date. So we're recording just after Labor Day weekend. And we're recording at a period of time where, kind of tech Twitter was a buzz over Paul Graham's founder mode essay and all the, subsequent kind of dialogue that sparked. I'm curious, like when you're working with founders, how much do they tend to tap into some of these, voices and leaders who are, very active, have very strong opinions about different aspects of scaling a business versus being very locked into the problem they're trying to solve and kind of maybe blocking out some of that, wisdom noise, depending on, how you want to kind of color each comment. Like, how do you find the founders you work with tend to think about like the conversations that tend to be happening at at an industry level while they're really heads down and trying to build?
Good question. Yeah, I think we have some founders that they're not even on Twitter, and they've helped. They've probably had some of the biggest exits and building some of the biggest companies. We have some founders that they're incredibly active on Twitter, but mostly it's just like talking shit, and really not, engaging too much. So there is a variety, but I would say the kind of the theme that unites, the types of founders that we work with is that they know their job is, not running out of money. They know their job is executing on a strategy and have a vision for it. And they know their job is hiring incredible people. And those things are all like very, closely attached. So they tend to, I think, just kind of block out the noise and block out like, all of the most recent podcasts and, blogs and X, chatter. I mean, half the things you read on X about VC are just like straight up not true. So I think probably more than that, probably like 95%. So yeah, I think that's kind of what the people we align with tend to think.
Yeah, and Jay, when you think about kind of the founders that you work with, and obviously now you've both been a part of a lot of different hires, you've worked with different founders. They're all going to have different styles, I would imagine, in terms of like not necessarily how they view talent. I imagine they probably uniformly view talent as like a key differentiator and success enabler, but the way that they approach, how they engage talent, how they assess talent, how they, have the mindset of like their role is the number one recruiter in the business, in addition to all the other things they're doing, because really they are what is going to be the individual that people are going to be drawn to work for and with. Like, do anything, and you don't have to give me any companies or names. I don't want to put you on the spot with that, but I want to talk about practices. Like, from the people you've worked with, do any practices stand out where you're like, this person really gets it and they're doing this unique thing and it's helping them win these key hires? Like, when you think about, I don't use the term best practice because I think that's an individualistic, statement in terms of what's actually best. But like, what are some things that you've seen founders do in the way that they approach hiring talent that you feel has really kind of stood out and helped driven their success?
No, it's a great question. I think there is no kind of one formula, as you pointed out. But I think it really is this mindset, right? Is this obsession about hiring the best of the best. Going back to some of the points that even Rusty mentioned, it's like, right, low ego, high integrity, high agency, right, high intellectual horsepower. The best founders know that it's all about the people, right? Because they have a vision, they have a strategy, but it's all about execution. And it takes, really capable, really smart, really driven, right, highly motivated individuals to kind of align with you and your vision and actually execute on that. So I think the best founders really know they're never responding to, or rather they're never engaging with candidates or reaching out to candidates with a quote unquote job description in mind. It's like an always on mode where they're always seeking to meet the most interesting, the most driven people, right? Looking at the competitive landscape, like who are the best people working for my competition? A lot of these new kind of category creation opportunities, there are no competitors, there are no comps, right? So how do you look at maybe other adjacent categories where maybe similar startups have solved similar types of problems? How do you engage, that 0 to 1 person who did that in that other company in a different role or in a different industry? How do you gonna get that person excited about joining you on your mission? So the best founders realize that this is their life's work, that people are everything, and that if you're not always thinking about recruiting and always, growing a network and engaging with folks, even if it's not an open role, just knowing who the best people are that you should be going after when the right moment arrives.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And I appreciate, getting a better sense of how you guys think about investments and how you're scaling Swell VC. I want to leave you with a question for each of you. And I think a lot of our audience, whether they're on the founder side, the venture side, or the talent side, they're all recruiting in different sense. And so I know you both have a lot of experience with that. Is there a particular, when you think about assessing talent, ways to find, again, that top 1%, what tip might you have? We're going to close out with some tips. Like, it could be a particular interview question you love. It could be a way to kind of gauge someone's background or kind of gauge is how they're framing things on their resume or LinkedIn or, kind of valid, or is it inflated? So I won't be prescriptive around what it is, but I'd love to just have each of you share your kind of number one tip for people when it comes to assessing really strong talent. And Rusty, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I think a really practical thing is you have to drill down into what value did this person create versus what value did the person manage, right? Like if it's a lot easier to incrementally kind of make tweaks that add 5% gains a year, if you will. But I think with startups hiring, startups have to hire people who know how to create value from scratch. And those people tend to come from startups. They understand. But even at those startups, let's say a Series A, Series B, Series C company, if the company is successful, everybody's going to claim that they created the value there, right? Like every salesperson will be like, oh, I'm the, I closed the best deals, or, I was the reason why I think they're so successful. Every product person is going to, claim that, oh, I built the core product, the MVP, that was me. The marketing strategy, like the company works not just because, it has to be everything, right? And they clearly, whatever company that successful company was, they clearly solved a customer problem and customers loved it. But you have to really drill down into finding the people that actually created the value, and which means question after question after question of getting to really what did they do, and specifically, and if they know that, sales process or product or marketing, whatever they're working on, back and forth, right? And they know every single detail, you'll get to the people that actually created the value versus the people that, maybe are more on the side of oh, I was involved with it, but they didn't actually do it.
Yeah. No, that's really great advice. That ability to kind of dig deep and understand what their role was That's rarely, if you're not the creator, that's really something you're going to see on a resume or LinkedIn or elsewhere. You're like, I was on a team. I was the 10th person of a 10-person team responsible for delivering X. So yeah, that's great advice. Jay, let me give you the last word here. What advice would you have on assessing high potential talent?
Yeah, kind of switching gears to the personal side, right? Like I think accomplishments and resume and kind of body of work aside, like who are they, right? What makes them tick? Really getting to the person, who they are. Understanding kind of their inner, deeper kind of desires of how they want their life to play out. With we talk a lot about like career arcs, but what about like the life arc, right? Like, and how has that progressed? How has that evolved over time? How has their thinking been shaped by those experiences that they've had? Something that we really dig into is like why people have made those jumps and moves along the way, right? And that's a resume or a LinkedIn profile never tells you that story. Really understanding why they made those moves, right? What were they looking for in each move they made? When was that box checked? Why was that box checked? Why did they switch gears to something else? And I think it's really kind of getting to the deeper inside track of what really makes people tick and why they do what they do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, excellent advice as well. So again, if you were watching or listening, hopefully you're taking some notes and you've got a few things to put in your tool belt now to go back and help your organization find some stellar talent. So guys, I really appreciate coming on the show, sharing your experience, your wisdom. If the audience wants to connect with you or learn more about Swell VC after watching, what's the best way for them to do that? Is just LinkedIn? And what would be the best website for them to go to or anywhere else that you want to direct them?
Yeah, our URL is swell.vc. First names, emails are first name at that, and LinkedIn and X are both great ways, all great ways to connect.
Great.
And thank you so much, Lars, for having us in the pod. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys coming on and
awesome.
All the best. And again, we'll have links to the website in the show notes. So definitely you can check that out. And thanks again for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.